welcome to Empathy Week, our first sort of online training for teachers and educators. Thank you so much for being here. Whilst we're just waiting for a couple of people to join, I'm going to kickstart. My name's Ed, I'm the founder of Empathy Week. Welcome to this event we have with Born Free. Before we start, and as I said just whilst we're waiting, if you could take part in this anonymous poll, that would be amazing. So, oh, there we go, if I don't lose it. You can scan or you can join. So if you have, like me, you're on a laptop and you've got your phone nearby, you can scan the QR code and you can join, and your mobile will work as almost an automated device. So you can then use it to answer, or you can join at slido.com and enter the code 1173118. And all we're asking you is, what are you hoping to learn from today? So I can see someone's typing, which is amazing, means it's working. What are you hoping to learn? The answers are all anonymous. This is really an amazing opportunity for you to speak to experts in this field, to really delve into what it means to promote safety for animals, for empathy, to learn empathy through the lens of animal welfare, and also crucially take this back into your classrooms. Take what you're learning today and to upskill yourselves and to be able to bring it to the students that you teach. So here we go. Thank you so much. Welcome to those that are just joining. So everyone should start to be able to see each other's responses as well. Examples for the classroom, absolutely. Link to connect to organisations, amazing. So we're starting to see them come through. Great. Welcome to those just joining as well. So more about empathy promotion materials for use in my class, routes into the resources, lots about resources, new ideas, practical ideas for the classroom, ways to think more, how to promote empathy to primary children, open up discussions about animal welfare. Well, you're going to definitely hear from some experts today about how you can do that, to link our empathy work with our focus on nature and sustainability. Lovely. Resources, practical applications, curriculum links. Fantastic. Okay, great. Got a few more people still typing. Sustainable ways to take action. And I think crucially for this training as well, what that action is, because we can take action, but what's the right best action we can take, and maybe what's sometimes the action that we should maybe avoid, because sometimes just taking action isn't necessarily the right thing to do. It depends on the type of action. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. As I've said, I'm going to just end the screen. We'll be using this later on. And what you'll start to see when I stop sharing is some of our amazing panelists that are going to kick off this show. You'll see some other of us at the top of your screen as well. You can use the Q&A function, or you should also be able to use the chat. So please do ask or put any comments, any questions in there that you would like to have answered throughout the process of this CPD training. I'm going to quickly introduce Will Travers, who is the president and co-founder at Born Free, who is kindly chairing the panel and discussion for us for the first part. And we have a dedicated section where Laura and Charlie from Born Free are going to be talking about what does this look like in a classroom, all the goodies you can get your hands on. So Will, over to you to then also introduce Glenn and Jenny.
Well, thank you, Ed, and thank you everybody who's joined this, the guests, the special guests, and also all of the teachers from a multitude of countries around the world, everywhere from the UAE to Myanmar, Kenya, USA, UK, Thailand, Germany, Sweden, Pakistan, India, Italy, and many more. It is absolutely wonderful to be here, and I am particularly excited because I want to learn about empathy, and it's not like I haven't been doing some of this for a while. I co-founded this charity nearly 41 years ago, 41 years next week actually, and I'll just give you a tiny bit of quick background. Born Free has always been interested and regarded animals as individuals very important to us, and it all began for us in a sense with a story about a lioness called Elsa, who was successfully returned to the wild by two humans. Now, just imagine, before that, lions in literature were broadly described as bloodthirsty killers And you have to think of books like The Man-Eaters of Savo, etc. Or if it was a gorilla, it would be King Kong rampaging across wherever it was, New York or something. But the more we've studied and the more we've observed, the more we understand. And understanding is the key to all of this. And I suspect that many of the people on this call will have a companion animal of some species. Maybe it's a dog, maybe it's a cat. And you know, I know you know when that animal is happy or when that animal is sad. And so we've begun to regard animals as individuals with characteristics, with personalities, with emotions. And we've moved relentlessly away from the idea that animals are just some kind of living machines, which we can use with complete disregard for them as living creatures. And I'm excited to hear because I want to learn about empathy. And in this first session, which will last about another 20, 25 minutes, if we can squeeze it in, I'm going to talk to two people who've had incredible and different but related experiences in some way. So we have uh, Jenny Desmond, who is the founder of Liberia Chimpanzee Rescue and Protection. And full disclosure here, I was in Liberia last week with Jenny and her husband Jimmy at their center where, well, I won't spoil it. Jenny will tell us what they do. And then we also have Glenn Wiener, who's the animal care manager at Born Free's center at Shamwari in South Africa. And again, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to ask Glenn to tell us a bit about what he does as well. So let's start with that just for a minute or two. I don't know if you can do this, but just encapsulate kind of what you do and maybe where you come from. What's your journey been to this point in time? So let's start with you, Jenny.
Okay, thanks, Will. And thanks everybody for joining. I'm really honored to be part of this and excited to hear back from everyone who's watching. I think all of us here can say that education and working with younger generations is the key to everything here. And I think empathy, I think personally, I believe we're born with empathy. And I think we can nurture it or we can kind of take it away. So in the world I work in, which is chimpanzee rescue and conservation, we rescue chimpanzees from the illegal bushmeat and pet trade in Liberia and also some additional countries in West Africa. We work across West Africa and we actually work across the continent and even globally to combat wildlife trade and trade in chimpanzees. And we rescue individuals and take them into our sanctuary for lifetime care. The chimpanzees who come to us, the individuals who come to us, their mothers have been killed and their family members, and they have been rescued by the authorities along with partnership with us. And we take them in, work with them to rehabilitate them and get them into a place where they're physically and emotionally okay to basically thrive in the semi-natural setting that we provide with a forested environment here for their lifetimes, which can reach up to 60 plus years. So that's kind of what we do. I don't know if you want to know more about that, but that's generally what we do. And then our motto is rescuing chimpanzees in need to keep wild chimps wild. So always our mission is to keep the chimpanzees in the wild. While we love our little guys here and our family, we really wish we never had to meet them. So the goal always is that no more come to us at some point soon, hopefully in time.
Jenny, that's really helped set the scene. And I suspect that last point that you kind of wish you could go out of business is something that you would share, Glenn. Glenn, do you want to just give us a minute or two about your experience and where you've got to?
Great. Thank you, Will. Jenny, thank you for that lovely introduction. Well, I always say I am the luckiest person, human, to be working, looking after the kids that Born Free have rescued from appalling conditions all around the world. I get to spend time with them, learn more about them, learn about their different personalities. And they are all different. They are all unique in their own ways. Some will take 6 months to get used to their new home. And I mean, we keep them in large natural enclosures that they can have their privacy. Some take 5 years to trust, to learn to that we are the good humans. We will not hurt them. And even after 5 years, I'm struggling with a leopard. His name is Mowgli. He's a melanistic leopard that came from a zoo here in South Africa where he was treated very poorly, and he literally dislikes humans with a passion that I cannot describe to you. And these are the individuals that we care for, and we give them a forever home for the next couple of years that they can be with us. And for me, that gets emotionally involved with the kids. Sometimes it gets a bit heartbreaking to say goodbye to my friends, their family, because I got to know them all these years, you know. So 25 years I've been with the organization, and we meet people from different countries that visit Shamwari. We have an education program that we have here where we educate over 300 local kids from our local communities about compassionate conservation, how we should preserve and protect our wildlife in the natural environment. So it's nice to share their stories, and hopefully we can keep our wildlife for many years in their natural environment.
Thanks, Glenn. And you've both raised a very interesting point here. I mean, I remember reading in a book that not that long ago, it was possible in London to pay a small amount of money and go to what was then called the asylum, or it referred to as Bedlam, where people who had really severe mental challenges were regarded as some form of entertainment. 300 people a day used to go there and look at these afflicted individuals, and they were a source of amusement. Now, I hope that we have all moved miles beyond that. We understand about mental well-being. But, and you've talked about two sophisticated non-human species. You've talked about chimpanzees and you've talked about lions and other big cats. My question, which may be a bit challenging, is, are there animals that we can be empathetic towards? And in a sense, are there animals or species that we can't? And I'll throw two examples at you. The Daily Mail, a more conservative publication in the United Kingdom, has been reporting on a ban on the live boiling of lobsters because recent research has clearly identified that lobsters have feelings and can feel pain, but also can feel fear, the fear of what may come. And similarly, there's been a huge reaction to the idea that there should be an octopus farm on the Canary Islands, a huge negative reaction to that, because we understand now so much more about octopuses. And if you haven't seen the film, My Octopus Teacher, then please watch that film, because it's a real eye-opener about a species that we know so little about. So do you think, firstly, should we be empathetic to everything? And secondly, do you think that being empathetic as human beings can lead to positive behavioral change? So, Jenny, over to you.
Well, that's a big question.
It is very big.
Yeah, I would say Glenn and I are probably going to agree on a lot of these things, I would imagine. But I would say, yes, I think we should have empathy for all living beings, and maybe even have empathy for plants and trees also, of course.
Agree.
But when we think of, if we know, as we say, if we know something, then we should act on it. So when we know that the lobster feels pain and fear, we should act on that. We should make the right decisions surrounding how we treat that individual. We can always talk about what we don't know and we're not sure about, but in my opinion, if we know that or we suspect that, why not take the road of empathy? What I think is a really good point, especially with chimpanzees. And Glenn, maybe you can talk about lions and big cats, but with chimpanzees, we have a really unique opportunity because they are so much like humans. They, in my mind, are a real gateway to opening people's minds to having empathy. And so we always call them a flagship species. We talk about that for conservation. If everybody can say, oh, we really shouldn't kill chimpanzees, we shouldn't eat chimpanzees, we shouldn't hurt chimpanzees because they're like our cousins. They look like us. They seem so much like us. Even in Liberia, people say they're just like real people. That's the term they always say to me. But in conservation, we use it in the sense that if we protect chimpanzees and their habitats, we project everything under that umbrella, right? All other species, their habitats, and ultimately humans as well. But I think that can come across also with empathy. If we can have empathy for certain species, well, I believe we should have empathy for all. Maybe it's easier if we start with certain species where we can identify with them, charismatic species, species who have socially complex ways of interacting, maybe even like, I think Glenn can talk about lions, but where we can see emotion in them. So maybe we can't see an emotion in a lobster as easily as we can with a lion or a chimpanzee. But if we start with those charismatic individuals, I think we start to open the door to others.
Tell you what, Jenny, that's a very good point. A little story about myself. I grew up on a farm. My father had sheep, cattle, and our main priority was to protect the livestock at all cost. So I joined the Shamwari team as an intern, met Born Free, got to learn about lions, got to learn about leopards, how we can all coexist. And that empathy that I got from Born Free, I have passed on to my fellow community members. And people coexist with wildlife, with, can I say, with the sheep, with the cattle and everything, which is amazing. So, yes, I'm totally in agreement with what you say. We should be empathetic, to every living creature. Even if it's a tree, we need oxygen. If we don't look after trees, how?
It's a very good point, Glenn, and also Jenny. And I'm wondering if perhaps one way of summarizing what you're saying, particularly that last point you were making there, Glenn, is if we ignore empathy or if we reject empathy, then we kind of also reject any obligations we might have to welfare. And it's a difficult balancing act. Glenn, I'm going to ask you on this because big cats eat meat, and so part of your agenda, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please feel free to respond to this, is that you can still be empathetic to the cattle or to the sheep that are going to end up perhaps as food for lions. It doesn't mean you treat lions really well, but you mistreat other species. There is a circle of life, to use that rather cliched phrase, but that doesn't mean that we should ignore the welfare and the impact on individual animals, even though they may end up being part of, a food cycle for another species.
Agree, Will. And we run very valuable clinics for our local people here between Shamwari and Born Free, where we educate people on how to look after their livestock, the pets, which would be dogs or cats. And it's a very delicate balance that you have to create. And it warms the heart up a little bit. And for an emotional person like me, I open a box that I don't want to open because I'm empathetic to the lions, to the cow, to the horse, to the sheep, to the goat that I would get from the farmer, that he would donate to me after he or she has passed, and I would use that body to feed our rescued cats that we care for. And it's very delicate, even when you go to the farmer, because Born Free's been here since 1999. We have created a wonderful relationship with our local farmers. When you go to his property, He'll be crying, he'll be sad. And you have to show empathy to that gentleman and say, sir, I'm sorry for your loss, but thank you for your donation. We'll put it to good use. And we invite them over to come and see our sanctuary, see our rescued cats. And the story continues. So I agree, it's the life circle. It's a sensitive balance that, and you have to be a big softie. And I know, especially with us men, they say there's no place for softies. We have to be tough, you know. We have to take things by the horns. Some things are meant to be tamed. No, we're in a different era now. We need to talk about things. We need to find solutions to serious matters and resolve them so that our children or their children's children can view what we love now. And it's very important. And that's why I wake up every morning, every day with a smile on my face, because I think I'm in such a unique position to, I'm not sure am I using the right word here, to tell the story, not just Born Free story, but to tell our story, that wildlife belongs in the wild. Everybody deserves to have a space there.
Glenn, thank you, and gosh, I couldn't agree more. And Jenny, just briefly on this, and then I'm going to probably open it up for questions, because I suspect I can't see on the screen, but I suspect there are some questions, and I want to give 5 minutes to that. Jenny, I mean, I was so fortunate to be with you in Liberia last week, and you have an extraordinary team of people living in a really, really challenging country. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. It is, you know, pretty much a hand-to-mouth existence, and yet the ladies and the men, but the men are perhaps doing more construction stuff around your property, but the ladies who care day in and day out for those many, many chimpanzees that you have show extraordinary levels of empathy. And I just wondered if you could, you know, empathy doesn't cost anything. You don't have to come from a rich country to have empathy. You can come from anywhere. And I just wonder if you could comment on that.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, because we talk so much about the chimps, and I think, you know, we talk about the lions and the whatever individuals in terms of the non-human animals living in our rescue centers and our work, but the caregivers here, as you met, are extraordinary. And the level of empathy, yeah, it's something I've really never seen before. And to see that in a country who's survived 2 civil wars, Ebola outbreaks, people live on $1 a day, $1 a day. As you know, well, driving through the village near us, which isn't far from the capital city and right next to the airport, no electricity, no running water for most households. And yet those are the people who work here and work with us and heal these chimpanzees who come with absolute extreme severe mental trauma, but also broken limbs, shrapnel in their bodies. They're broken little people, and our caregivers heal them. And so, and that's through empathy. And I think, if anything, the experiences they've had, it shows you how important empathy is and how powerful it is, because the experiences these women who have had is what they carry over to their empathy to understand what the chimpanzees have been through. And you see this chain. And again, it's a different circle of life, but another circle of life to be giving back. And it's healing, I think, for the caregivers as well as the chimpanzees. And it's really beautiful. And that's all empathy. And like you said, it doesn't cost anything. In fact, it reaps rewards, if any.
Yeah, it's definitely part of your lived experience and enriches your lived experience if you can tap into that. Now, as I said, I don't know if there are any questions that our audience might have. If they do, maybe somebody can help us out there. And if not, I'm sure I have many more questions that I could consider asking. So I'm looking to see, and if
Well, I'm going to jump in because we had one sent in anonymously. What happens if we have empathy but no action?
Well, that's a really great question, because empathy in itself isn't, in a sense, enough. We're looking for that behavioral change. And Glenn's talked about it, all the kids from the communities who come to Shamwari. And I'll start with you, Glenn, and I'll come to you, Jenny. Glenn, what do you see happen to those children when they're exposed to the value set that you offer them?
First of all, appreciation, respect for the environment, appreciation for the wildlife. Remember, I'm not sure for those that are on the call, have they been to Shamwari? We're surrounded by 3 communities, Peterson, Ellersdale, and Edo. And you've got this massive private-owned wildlife reserve where all the tourists come to. So what Shamwari Born Free enable the community to come through our education center, they get to experience what those tourists see. That's where the appreciation come in, to respect what is there. The jobs that we get, from Shamwari. And I was 19 years old when I saw my first lion, my first elephant. But these are the wildlife that's within the area that we live in, and we don't have access to it. So the appreciation is big. We get to be introduced to the animals. We get to protect them because we know we get a source of income by the tourists that come and see what we're all about. And my lions are roaring in the background.
Glenn, that's great. And Jenny, and I've got one more question after this, which we've got time for. So Jenny, and your reflections on how what you're doing changes attitudes, and in your case, maybe it's about attitudes of people in government or people in administration, at quite a senior level, who come and visit. We had somebody come from the British High Commission only the other day when I was there. And yeah, I mean, literally, the smile on that face told you that you'd touched something, pretty profound.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We work across from young children up to government level, international governments, and yes, I think when we can talk about empathy and show empathy and encourage empathy, I think it not only changes and evolves for people who about the chimpanzees, but it also impacts how they treat each other and one another in the communities. I noticed a lot of times with children, when you can talk about the chimpanzees and how they suffered and they lost their parents, and maybe they were teased by people in the community or kept on a rope, you can watch the kids really start to kind of absorb that and think about it, and the adults absorb it and think about it. I often say many people, when they see a baby chimp here, don't think about the fact that the chimp had a mother. So where's the mother? And then they don't go to that next step. And so I think sometimes when we bring that whole concept of the history and the trauma, and that breeds that empathy, I think that expands out to how those children are treating each other in the classroom, how they're maybe going home and treating their brothers and sisters, how maybe the head of the wildlife department is seeing conservation differently, or maybe even how he's treating humans differently, understanding empathy, having empathy that goes outward. And I think also somebody mentioned action. Glenn, you mentioned action, and this is a little bit different spin on that. But one of the things I thought about when we were preparing for this was that as much empathy as we can put out there, and I think this is really important as educators or people who raise awareness or work in the field, or teaching, that you also have to have some practical solutions. And I think those things go hand in hand, because if I'm going to go out into a community and say, please don't kill the chimps, these are the reasons, I want you to understand how they feel, they laugh, they cry, they have loss and trauma. At the same time, those chimps might be coming in and raiding their crops or biting someone in the community because they've encroached on their habitat. Might not be the chimpanzee's fault. In fact, it isn't. but it is important to come along with empathy, to also have empathy for those communities and what they're dealing with when the chimpanzees do come into their communities, and work with them on solutions. I think those things are really important, is having, and that to me is having empathy for everyone in this situation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And there's, I can see in the chat now, I'm sorry, I can see the questions that are being raised, and some of them are about, how do we practically address empathy in terms of a learning institution or working as educators and such like. And I will come to that, but I'll come to that a little bit later, because that's when Charlie Smith, who's Born Free's education officer, is going to help us get practical. But there was a really big philosophical question that came up, and I do want to raise it, because people will have different views on this, or maybe they won't. So that question that you've probably all been asked before, you're faced with a dilemma. There's a small child in terrible danger, in mortal danger, and there's an animal, and a very, simpatico animal that's also in mortal danger, and you can only save one. And what do you do in those circumstances? And I said it's difficult, but it makes you think. And I have spent a great deal of time thinking about that question, but I will offer a thought, but only after you two have had a chance to also offer a thought.
Sure. Well,
Go
I
on,
mean,
Glenn.
I work with predators, and um, and we all know what a predator do, and especially ones that came from horrible places that develop lots of hate for humans. If there's a child and we've got the predator, uh, we are given certain tools to eliminate the predator and save human life. I know it's difficult to say. That's why I'm even lowering my voice now, because I don't want to sound if I'm pro that. Um, but it's a very difficult one. And what I do, and I've not been in that situation, and I never want to be in that situation. Um, but I'll try to exhaust all options before I pull the trigger.
Yeah. And Jenny, I mean,
I'd have to agree with that. The one thing I will say is, I think we're posed with that question a lot. I don't know, Glenn, you just said you haven't been in that situation. I haven't either. I think it is a little bit of a question that isn't realistic. I mean, there's very few instances where you're going to literally be faced with a child and an animal in danger and you have to choose one. So for me, it's more of a philosophical question. And so therefore, I'm going to give a philosophical answer, which is we should be trying to protect all. And we should be looking for, again, solutions. We should have empathy for everyone in the situation, and we should be looking for solutions that can hopefully avoid or prevent those kinds of situations. And if the situations are already happening, how can we try and resolve those situations with everybody, considering everyone's benefit. I think someone who is a very good friend of mine, Stephen Wise, who I'm sure you know well, animal rights. He just passed away. He's an amazing man. He was looking for legal personhood for certain species, including chimpanzees. And while many people didn't agree with him, I always thought he always got the question in his lectures where someone said, if your child was sick with a disease and could be cured by killing 100 chimps, what would you do? And he said, well, of course, people thought he would say, well, I would save the chimps because that's what I believe in. He said, well, of course, I'd save my kid. I'd kill the 100 chimps. And he said, but that doesn't mean I should be allowed to. And that always stuck with me, because I think it really says about that we do have to think of things outside of ourselves as a species.
it is, as you say, I mean, we're almost never going to be confronted with that situation reality. So it's a sort of philosophical, moral, and ethical question. And I guess my reflection on it, which is for sure imperfect, is that were I confronted with that situation and I had a little baby Glenn or a little baby Jenny, as my choice between the animal and one of you, I would choose the human being, because without that, I wouldn't have the adult Glenn and I wouldn't have the adult Jenny, who have done so much and are doing so much for animals. So I think of the potential. And of course, human beings have the potential to do lots of terrible things, but they also have the potential to do extraordinarily selfless and amazing things on behalf of other human beings, but also on behalf of non-human animals around the world. So I have to say, never wanting to be faced with that dilemma, that I would choose the human, and I would hope and do everything I can to make sure that that human delivered their potential for good, because their potential is way beyond, with due respect, what a lion cub or even a baby chimpanzee can do.
Yeah.
So listen, those
Well,
have been
Glenn, we
some...
better hope that Will is with us if we're in that situation.
Yeah, you're right. Listen, I want to say we now have a second session. I want, on behalf of the audience, to thank Jenny and Glenn for being with us, for sharing their insights, and they've given us the sort of platform that are now allows myself to have a conversation with Charlie Smith, about the practical interpretation of that. So guys, it's not really goodbye. It's just stay on, stay tuned in, and stay in touch, of course, beyond this. I mean, we're in touch often, but thank you so
Thank you.
much. And
Thanks for the
and
opportunity.
it's really, really helped our understanding. So with that, if you guys want to, yes, I have now got Charlie Smith, who is the education officer at Born Free. And Charlie, I don't know about you, but I found that truly fascinating.
Absolutely.
And that big question now is in front of us, which is, how can we take that understanding, that compassion, and that identification with empathy, and create practical tools that can be deployed in what is an incredibly crowded educational environment, where subjects compete for oxygen. So give us a few suggestions and then we can discuss further.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you said, Will, the curriculum we know is jam-packed. Teachers are very short on time, but the reality is the chances are that you guys are already doing some amazing work in your day-to-day actions already, which is fantastic. So we can give you some kind of tips and pointers today, but chances are you're already doing amazing work to promote empathy for animals. Empathy is a skill, so it does need to be practiced like other subjects, but the great thing is that it can also be taught like any other subject. So you can include it as part of your structured lessons. You can integrate it into areas of the curriculum. And like I said, you can do it through your day-to-day actions as well. And I'm sure loads of you are doing it already.
And Charlie, I mean, you come from a teaching background, which I don't. And I would love to get a sense from you as to how you, as a teacher, when sitting in front of or beside or amongst your 30, 40 students, how do you know when something's landed? How do you know when you've had an impact? And obviously we're talking about empathy here. So you're discussing stuff and the rest of it, and you look round and they just blank faces looking back at you like, I have no idea what she's talking about. Or what's the other vision?
So I'm sure that most of the teachers watching today will know, obviously, something that's kind of referred to as the light bulb moment. So there's almost a kind of, oh, I get that, I understand that. And so if we think about that with empathy, for example, it might be, if we were looking at animals and accessing empathy for animals, it's actually, rather than going out onto the playground and your children chasing off a flock of pigeons, it might be actually, oh, we're going to stand back, we're going to watch, we're going to observe, we're going to think about what they're doing, rather than that kind of initial excitement, oh, it's really amazing to see these animals, I want to see them all fly away. Maybe kind of the students taking a step back and thinking, actually, what are my actions doing to impact those animals? So even just little things like that. So being able to teach students through your day-to-day actions, so modeling behaviors, watching rather than chasing. If you're in the classroom, actually, we're going to catch this insect that's come inside rather than killing it or squishing it. We're going to release it back outside where it belongs. And if you just find, like I said, animals around the school grounds, giving them the space, giving that time, and also giving the students that opportunity to observe. And if, like I said, working with kids and animals, it's always unpredictable. You never know what will happen, especially if they're kind of young kids as well. If they do get too overexcited and they, oh, amazing, see a bird in the playground, flies away because of the loud noise, you can make that a teachable moment. So actually, why do we think it flew away? How do you think that animal feels when we make those loud noises? So bring it back to the empathy, putting themselves in that animal's shoes, and then actually they can start to kind of understand. We can build those blocks towards those more complicated theories around empathy.
I think that's absolutely right. And I know that the two previous speakers have, work with exotics, animals that 99.9% of us are never going to have an interaction with. But your point about looking for the opportunities to interact with nature and with wildlife that is around us, be it the pigeon in the playground or the squirrel on a tree or whatever it is, and looking at the way that that animal behaves in response to how we behave is important. Now, some people say, well, why not go one step further and bring animals into the classroom? I mean, when I was young, that seemed to be a bit of all the rage, but it's quite controversial. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, not only, as it were, from the educational value, but also from the animal, the impact that this may have on the animal.
So yeah, as we've seen earlier in this session, animals, they have their own needs, they have their own feelings and their own personalities. And so when we bring an animal into the classroom, whether they're a domestic animal, whether they're a wild animal, it can be a stressful experience for them. So if we want to truly empathize with animals, we do need to recognize the impact that we might be having. So both the RSPCA and the Dogs Trust, who are charities here in the UK that care for wild animals and pets, they actually advise against the keeping of school dogs and school pets. And whilst there is some amazing research to show that having school pets and school dogs has a really beneficial impact on staff and students, there isn't actually any research that goes the other way around. So we don't know how those animals are feeling in that situation. So it could be potentially that they are feeling stressed, they are feeling overwhelmed in these busy environments. And so until we're sure of that, until we're sure of the impact we're having on those animals, those organisations are actually recommending against keeping school pets, for example. And here in the UK and in England, in the National Curriculum for Science, within our own non-statutory guidance, there is actually a suggestion to bring animals into the classroom through hatching programs, so chick hatching or frog spawn, for example. But actually, we need to be mindful of the message that we're bringing across to our students when we do that, because actually those animals are being brought in really for our own benefit. Where they should be is with their mother hen in their own natural environment. So we need to be mindful of the impact that message could have on students. So just if you are thinking of taking part in schemes like this, just have a kind of step back and think, actually, is this best for the animal, their welfare? And also, am I having real, true empathy for those animals if we are taking them out of their natural situation?
Yes, indeed. So to try and sort of summarize that a bit, it's like your starting point is do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, you have to think quite profoundly of what harm, how you would define harm. So that's important. The second point that you're making really is that we should adopt the precautionary principle. So if we don't know, then we shouldn't.
Absolutely.
Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And
Yeah,
I'm reminded of it was terribly popular when I was young for people to have hamsters. But hamsters are extremely prone to high levels of stress and literally can die of a heart attack if they are handled in an inappropriate way, which may well be the case when we don't really know how to handle hamsters. So I would urge everyone to be very aware of the impact that we may be having on those individual animals, and not think quite so anthropocentrically about what we want out of it, but also what that means for the animal. Now, you mentioned earlier, Charlie, about the very crowded teaching environment where lots of different subjects are competing, and particular subjects that aren't kind of formalized. You know, this isn't mathematics, for example. It's not necessarily creative writing, but I suspect that you will have ideas as to how those how empathy can form part of the narrative around more formal subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the key things, we've obviously spoken about bringing animals into the classroom, but actually, no matter where you are, everyone has the opportunity to interact with or observe wildlife. So it doesn't matter if you're based in the city. Studies have shown that just watching garden birds or even squirrels can help develop young people and children's emotional intelligence. So actually, those are, again, those vital building blocks for helping build empathy, for understanding our own emotions and therefore others' emotions. So no matter your setup, there are ways for you to be able to enable your students to interact with wildlife, to learn from wildlife. So whether that is having a wildlife area in your school grounds, so setting up bird feeders, bird baths, wildlife stations, having nest boxes with remote cameras if you're able to do that. But even if you're not able to do that, there's still ways that you can interact with wildlife. So there are ways that you can actually stream online. There's amazing resources here in the UK. We have the Wildlife Trusts. They have an entire page dedicated to actually webcams, so you can watch the local birds coming in. There's a live camera around puffins, peregrine falcons, you name it. There's a whole range of wildlife based around the country as well, so you can look at what's in your local area. And also what's really nice about those is some of those are live, and some of those are showing highlights as well. And sometimes from time to time, you might log into a live camera and there's nothing happening. And that's actually quite nice. It's a good lesson, because actually wildlife needs to be off doing its own thing. So it's another thing that you can talk about your students with, and actually, what is that animal doing right now? Where might it be? This is another example of a live stream that you can find, which shows highlights. And here you have amazing underwater cameras from an organization called Orca Lab, who Born Free works with. And here, I wonder if anyone does actually know what they're taking part in here. So if you want to have a guess as to what these orca are doing, so this is what you can do with your students to say, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? How do you think they're feeling right now whilst they're doing this activity? So we'll see if anyone does respond to us in the chat box with that. So even if you can't get outside, even if you don't have the space in your playground, there are ways in order to interact with wildlife, allow your students to see amazing wildlife. And like I said, even just getting outside, going to local nature reserves, going to parks, watching wildlife documentaries, these are all ways that you can start pointing out to students, actually, they've got their own individual needs, they've got their own individual character, talking about what they're doing and questioning students. So actually it brings out and brings home to the fact that they are able, they are animals that have those needs, and bring that empathy to the fore. But yes, thank you, Carol. They are cleaning. Well done.
It's a lovely bit of footage. So well done to anyone who guessed that. Yes, Carol Barker, well done. That's great. That's called a rubbing beach, and I've been out to Orca Lab. I haven't actually seen that behavior because I was above the water, and there's a miracle, because if you say the only way that we can understand a species like an orca, which is the biggest member of the dolphin family, is to put it in a tank in a dolphinarium, then that will never happen. You will never see that behavior. And it's only by harnessing now technology that wasn't available 30, 40 years ago, but is available now, that we can get these insights. And the more research that's carried out, and by research I mean benign research, the sort of work that Jane Goodall and Paul Spong with the orca and Cynthia Moss and Dr. Winnie Kiru and others do, looking at how animals behave in their natural environment. Those studies are what opens the door to understanding. And remember, we said at the start how important understanding is. And you're right, Charlie, this point about there is kind of wildlife on our doorstep. I'm thinking of the UK, which has had a terrible depletion of wild species over the last 50 years. We've lost about 60% of our wild spaces, but nevertheless, there are 3,000 nature reserves across the United Kingdom alone that are probably within reach. They're probably on your doorstep. They might not be very big, but we shouldn't always be kind of seduced by what is big and glamorous. Sometimes it's looking at what is small and intimate, a bee moving from one bluebell to another, or one flower rose to another, whatever it happens to be, tells us something special. I mean, how many people know the life cycle of the dragonfly? And I'm not going to give it to you because we haven't got time, but look up the life cycle of the dragonfly and just be amazed at that incredible creature. So technology is really important. Seeing the world from an animal's point of view is also incredibly important. And then, and you've said, let's be precautionary, let's not bring animals into the classroom. But there was a question that was put earlier in the chat about, the move away from seeing animals in zoos. And why do you think, I mean, we've been at the forefront at Born Free of that discussion, saying that, animals in zoos, it's a problem. From an educator's point of view, Charlie, how would you summarize why, well, you wouldn't work for Born Free unless you didn't believe it, but why you think that the zoo experience does not deliver the value that perhaps some people think it does?
So I think it's like you said just a minute ago, Will, with the rubbing beach, with the orca, we won't see that behavior in captive environments. So those animals have been taken away from their natural environment, and they aren't able to display or exhibit those natural behaviors that they would in the wild. A lot of them are confined to extremely small areas. So lions, for example, their enclosures can be tens, kind of sometimes hundreds of times smaller than their natural home ranges. So it causes all sorts of problems for the animals. So in terms of kind of their condition, also their diet is very different in captivity as compared to the wild. So whilst it is obviously really novel to be able to see those animals up close, we're not actually seeing those animals as they should be. So in terms of education, it's questioning how educational is this? Is it much better for us to actually watch a documentary on lions rather than seeing them in captivity? So it's, again, that kind of precautionary principle like you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. And I've noticed a question that's come up from Paula Aito, I hope I pronounced that right. In the UK, we're currently within the time frame of curriculum review. I'm sure that goes on in all countries around the world. And Paula asks, have we been able to contribute to the conversations around this? And Laura, who is our head of education, who is behind the scenes here, has responded to say, yes, we were able to offer evidence for the review, and we're looking forward to seeing the interim report and continuing to contribute to the discussion, because the more, in a sense, that we can embed the values that we've talked about today into the more formal subjects that are taught in schools, the more it will be part of the fabric of the students when they leave education, and hopefully it'll serve them well long into the future. We're coming towards the end, and I'm going to just say that Born Free has produced, and Charlie, you can by all means add to this, but Born Free has produced all sorts of resources, because we want to be practical here, all sorts of resources, here we go, that can assist in the whole teaching process and building this empathy that we've been talking about. These resources can address issues like, English, mathematics, science, history, art and design, and more, and technology and more. So they're incredibly, I think, valuable, and they are really designed with the teacher and the teaching experience in mind. So I'm very excited that these are available, and I think I'm right in saying, but Charlie, tell me if I'm wrong, that the links to these will be sent to everyone after this is over. In the next 2 or 3 minutes it'll close. It doesn't mean the email will come in 2 or 3 minutes, let me be clear, but you will get an email, and it will give you access to all these amazing tools. Am I right?
Yeah, so we'll email those out hopefully early next week. So those lessons that you saw on the board, they are related to and linked to a whole host of different subjects. So art, geography, science, English, you name it. So there's a huge variety of different lessons and topics that you can link those to. So hopefully there'll be a spring point, there'll be a starting point for you, and hopefully start showing you that there are ways, as well as those little 5-10 minutes observing wildlife, you can actually start integrating empathy for animals into the wider curriculum. So whether that be English, whether that's writing a diary from the point of view of an animal so that you're putting yourself in that animal's shoes, having debates around animal welfare, reading books from points of view of animals. So you have War Horse by Michael Morpurgo, for example, A Whale of the Wild by Rosanna Parry, amazing books to get children into that mindset as well. Even if it's things like maths, so actually talking about shape, space and measure. So actually we're going to measure how big this zoo enclosure, the average zoo enclosure will be, and we can compare it to the size of a zoo car park, for example, and then you can build that as a discussion, looking at the kind of disparities between some places which will keep elephants, for example, in smaller areas than they have their car park. So really starting those conversations through all manner of subjects. So whether it's science, whether it's history, looking at different animals throughout the ages. So whether it was the lions kept in the Tower of London, for example, by monarchs, whether it's the Roman Empire, and actually the use of lions fighting with gladiators. Would we do this today? You can have debates around the topic, and even things like art. So through that pack that we will be sending to you, there's this amazing art activity all around chimps, and you hear as well from Jenny as well, so you can introduce your class to Jenny as well, which is really exciting.
Thanks so much, Charlie. I'm just going to draw this to a close because I know we've got to finish on time with two quick comments. One is from Jenny, who's put in the chat, just in case you can't read it. Jenny says, in my experience working in this field, I've asked almost everyone I meet how they got their passion for working with wildlife and empathy for their experiences. And in her experience, not one has said Vara Zoo, despite the fact that there are 600 million visits made a year to zoos. She says not one has said Vara Zoo. In fact, many felt uncomfortable with that experience, and instead they named documentaries, nature, backyard discoveries. And my final thought, and it's a kind of humorous, hopefully humorous thought, is that some of you may have seen the film Vengeance Most Foul, the cartoon, the animated film called Vengeance Most Foul, made by the incredible Aardman animators. And in it, there is a penguin who is the baddie in the story. When he's caught, they put the penguin in prison, but they put him in a zoo. That's the difference in perspective that those animators had when they wanted to tell that story. So I think putting yourself in the position of the animal and thinking how you might feel, and by the way, don't be afraid of the word anthropomorphism, which is ascribing human values and feelings to animals, because the more we learn about animals, the less separate they are. So I want to thank the fantastic panelists, all of them, I want to thank Jenny and Glenn and Charlie, and I want to thank the backroom team, Ed and Katie and Laura, and there probably are others as well. But most of all, I want to thank all of you who've joined this webinar, because I've learned a lot. I hope it's been interesting and perhaps even inspiring for you. Get your hands on those fantastic resources, those teaching resources, and they will help bring it further to life for the rest of your life. So I think that's me done. I'm pretty much
Perfect. Thanks, Will. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Jenny, Glenn, Laura, and Katie in the back room as well, as Will's perfectly wrapped up. Those of you that have joined partway through, please do let us know your feedback. And even if you're watching on demand and following up, please also let us know your feedback. This will be open for a week after Empathy Week as well. It helps us shape better sessions for you, give us feedback. You can also use this form to ask any questions as well. I'll keep it open after after shutting down the webinar right now. So please do give us feedback if you can. It really does make a difference to us. And thank you so much for the storytelling. We are obsessed with using stories to develop empathy as well. And I think Jenny and Glenn, I mean, the stories you're telling about your experiences, the amazing work that you do, really brings it to life. And Will, Charlie, thank you so much for gathering perspectives and bringing it into a classroom context where we can actually take that action and change education as well in the way that we're talking about wildlife and animals and our environment. So thank you, everyone. Please do just go to slido.com or scan this QR code and take a minute to just give us your feedback. We really do appreciate it. And until next time, we will see you later. Enjoy Empathy Week. And thanks to everyone involved. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.